Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to another episode of Let's Talk Buffs. My name is Mario Vitanzi. With me, as always, Zachary Seegers. You can find us on Twitter because we refuse to call it X. You can find me at Vitanzi Therapy. You can find Zach at Zach_Seegers. Make sure you go threaten whoever has at Zach Seegers because whoever they are doesn't deserve it. And Zach, you deserve better than having an underscore in your Twitter handle.
Yeah, I'm not going to live that down until I finally change my account name. I can tell that's going to be weekly.
You know, you could just be like the myriad of fake experts on Twitter right now and just call yourself, Zach Seegers NFL. Because, if you tack on an NFL or like an NCAA or something like that to the end of your name, it automatically makes you an expert.
Yep. Then you're legit. Then you're real. Then you're credentialed. Shout out.
I think once you do that, Zach, I think maybe people will start taking you and taking me seriously. Maybe I should tack that on too and just be like Vitanzi Therapy NFL. People would have no freaking clue what my account is all about, but hey, it would make me legit, right?
People would think you're one of those Twitter injury doctors. Like, hey, this guy's got an ankle sprain out for weeks.
Oh, yeah. You mean the people that pretend to be experts who like the guy that actually got fired from the NFL team, but he has all this following on Twitter and people ask him questions. And what's interesting, because I actually noticed this about when he tweeted about Jerry Jeudy's injury, is he made a claim. He ended up being dead wrong. And I went back to go find the tweet. It was gone. So that dude, much like a lot of those kind of prognosticators on Twitter, delete their fake claims. But you know what, Buff fans? Me and Zach and I, the two of us, we don't delete anything. We give it to you how it is. We told you that we thought the Buffs would keep it close last week, and guess what? We were wrong. But we're not going to delete it because we are men of our word. So, of course, Zach, we have to discuss the Buffs' first loss of the season. It was a bit of a rout, 42-6 at Oregon. They were honestly lucky to score at the very end of the game to at least avoid the shutout. And we'll get into the specifics later. But everything that we have talked about in terms of our concerns, that's all kind of come to fruition. Like, finally, the lines not being quite good enough, it really kicked them in the ass. But before we get into that, Zach, I know that you have the audio of Dan Lanning, of course. It's the most popular that Dan Lanning is ever going to be. It's the most viral that he's ever going to be. So why don't you go ahead and pop that up?
Shoot, Mario, I totally dropped the ball. I had a big day at work today, and I totally forgot to download the audio.
It's okay. I know most of it. Don't worry about it. You should have told me that beforehand. But guess what, man? We stick and move. We're good. He basically said that what Oregon does is rooted in substance and not flash. He said that basically CU does what they do for clicks. They do what they do to win football games or whatever. So let me just say this and then I'll get your take on it, Zach. I have zero problem with the coach saying what he needs to say in order to hype his guys up for a game. Nothing is off limits to me. Like, if you need to get these young men hyped and motivated, that's your job as a head coach. That, like, just so everybody knows, I don't have a problem with that whatsoever. What I have a problem with is the hypocrisy. First of all, making the claim that Oregon football is rooted in substance and not flash? Zach, if there's one college football program aside from CU that is rooted in flash, it's the Oregon Ducks. Does the name Phil Knight ring a bell to anybody? Like, and here's the thing, like, I don't even have a problem with it, Zach. They want to be rooted in flash because they've got the best uniforms. They've got the best facilities. I'm pretty sure they have a different uniform every single week. For God's sakes, they had thermal generated shoes that changed color based on how hot they were. And then he goes on to say that they're not doing it for clicks as the camera is on him, and he knows that this is going to go viral. So again, I don't hate what Dan Lanning said at all. I don't like the hypocrisy of it. It's like, bro, you are known for flash. Like, this is the University of Oregon. I know you're relatively new here, but they have been a national championship contender and a perennial top 10 team solely based on flash.
Yeah, I think the thing that annoyed me the most is him talking about how the difference between these two programs is CU is playing for clicks while Oregon is playing for wins. And again, say whatever you need to do to get guys riled up. I just do think it's silly because of course CU is playing for wins. The real difference between CU and Oregon is what you just said. Oregon is a perennial top 10 program, at least since the Chip Kelly era. Like they are year in, year out, a top 20, top 15 program. CU was supposed to win 4 games this year. If you had betting the over on CU's win total this year meant you thought they were going to win 4 games. That's not even sniffing ranked. That's losing twice as many games as you're winning. Like,
yeah.
And then you go into Oregon, and it's like, oh, well, we're going to beat them because this team wants clicks or whatever. And there was kind of this really just the moving of the goalposts in general, I think we've seen. Dan Lanning's attitude is reminiscent to me of the Jim Harbaugh quote. He said it about Ryan Day, the guy who's Ohio State's head coach. Said some people are born on third base and think they hit a triple. And that's kind of what it is with Dan Lanning. Like, you didn't build Oregon up in anything. Like, you didn't start at Cal or start at Colorado or start at Oregon State. Look at Oregon State.
Oh, you mean Dan Lanning didn't take over a 1-11 program, Zach? Are you telling me that Dan Lanning took over a team who considers a 5-loss season a down year?
Exactly. Like, think about everything you said about Flash. If Dion took over Oregon, the Nike school, and Dan Lanning took over, like, genuinely barely have heard the name Dan Lanning. I heard him when he talked the stuff about Colorado leaving the Pac-12 this offseason, and then I heard his name in the run-up to this game. Otherwise, like, don't know the name Dan Lanning. If Dan Lanning is the head coach,
and you're not going to hear about it again to the rest of the year.
Exactly. If Dan Lanning was the head coach of Colorado and Coach Prime was the head coach of Oregon, it might be 70-0 with the recruits Coach Prime could have.
You think they would score 70 points in a game? That's crazy. Is it even possible? Ah, shit.
Yeah, rough weekend in Colorado. But like, I think it'd be even uglier if you had Prime on one side and Lanning on the other. It's just that, and then Oregon was playing a different game than CU. That is one thing that annoyed me with CU's coaching staff. It took way too long for CU to realize Oregon was here to embarrass them. Not just to beat them, but to embarrass them. You drive into Oregon territory, have, I forget exactly what, but 4th and 6 or so on Oregon side of the field. Your defense has already proven it cannot stop this Oregon offense. And you punt. There
should be no such thing as a punt in that game.
For real. Like, it's one thing against Jeff Sims. Fair. You punt in that game a lot. You punted in the CSU game a lot. Fair. But against TCU, where you were aggressive and going for it on 4th down because you knew what fucking time it was. This week, that was not the case. It was the moment they punted that ball, I'm like, this might be a game over. And I don't think punting the ball there is what lost them the game. I think they could have drove down there, scored a touchdown, and still got shellacked. But earlier, you opened with how they were lucky to avoid the shutout. I think they were only lucky to avoid the shutout because when they had a scoring opportunity early in the game, they punted the ball.
Yeah, exactly. And you're right. That kind of set the tone. Whereas on the other side, Oregon fakes a punt. What were they on their own, like 15-yard line or something like that? That is imposing your will on an opponent. And like, if people want to talk about it being disrespectful or this, that, and the other, like, obviously this is a Buffs podcast. We are Buffs fans. I don't have a problem with the team blowing out another team.
If you don't like it, stop it.
It happened to my team, but I mean, I used to coach baseball. And when I was coaching high schoolers, I would preach to them, like, we are not going to stop playing our game because the guys on the other side of the field aren't good enough to stop us. Different sport, same message. It's getting to the point now where these college students are borderline professional athletes because a lot of them are getting paid. Shedeur Sanders is making close to $5 million. I'm sure Bo Nix is making money. I'm sure there's plenty of people on both sides of that roster, both sides of that field that are making money. So they are like kind of semi-professional athletes. Do not take your foot off the gas. And Oregon made it very clear very early, we're going for it on 4th down because they knew, like, even if we don't convert this, you do not pose a threat. And that was exactly the message that they sent. And that was the message that CU needed to send, that we're in your house. We're not scared of you. We're not going to back down. And you're 100% right. As soon as they decided to punt, that, like, to me, that was waving the white flag. And it's like, it's not if you're going to lose at that point, it's by how many. And it ended up being a lot. And it could have been more.
And we talked about it. This game, if CU was going to win it or keep it close, it had to be a shootout. Immediately they went, we're not down to compete in a shootout. And that was, I don't know, that was ball game. And I do want to circle back. CU was never supposed to win this game.
Right.
CU was never supposed to win this game. In the offseason, it was, I mean, most college football analysts were telling you to take the under on a 3.5 win total.
Well, they thought it was easy money, Zach.
Exactly. Like this CU team was not supposed to go into Oregon, go into anywhere and beat a top 10 team. Hell, they're not supposed to beat a top 10 team at home this week. They shouldn't. Yeah. Hell, if they can upset USC, that would be outstanding. And we'll get into that in a little bit. But that's not where this program is this year. Next year, we should be talking about, can CU go into Kansas State and upset Kansas State? Can they go into Baylor and upset Baylor? Can they go into Stillwater and upset OK State? We should be talking about them battling with anyone in the Big 12 and trying to win a Big 12 conference championship. Absolutely. That's not this year. This is a growing year. You look at
and I think anybody that tried to convince themselves that CU was going to be like an actual national championship contender, they bought into the hype. And it's okay. There was a lot of shiny things going on. There was a lot of stuff being served on silver platters to us that we were eating up. But when it comes down to brass tacks, they simply do not have the players to hang with the big boys. This is why going into the season, the expectation, or the hope at least, like the best case scenario really, Zach, was like, can we get to a bowl game? Can we be competitive in the Pac-12? I mean, anybody who really thought that they had a chance to win the Pac-12 or even be one of the Final Four in the college football playoff, they were kidding themselves. And like, granted, I got bought in a little bit after the TCU game, and I'm like, yo, we might actually have something here. And then when I was able, like when cooler heads prevailed and I was able to calm down, I realized TCU lost a lot of guys. It's like, don't get me wrong, it's obviously a very impressive win, but TCU and Oregon are not on the same level. TCU and USC are not nearly on the same level. Like, that is a very different TCU team than it was last year. So everything that has happened to this point, like, it's not shocking that they lost to Oregon. If anything, it's shocking that they went into Oregon 3-0, regardless of how it looked, regardless of who they beat and how they beat them.
They beat good teams. They've got one of the hardest non-conference schedules in college football. That's the other thing. Like, they didn't cupcake their way to 3-0. This is a successful season for the Colorado Buffaloes. Their recruiting class is going to be insane. Like, it is a big, big, big step in the right direction. This is not where they're at. The most successful college football rebuild of the past 2 years, I mean, like, quick rebuild of a college football program, is Scott Frost at UCF, where they go from 0-12 to 6-6, 6-7, actually. They lost their bowl game. And then they were 13-0 the next year and claimed they were national champions and did that whole thing.
They're still national champions in my heart too, man.
But like, that's the thing. Like, if you go from a tire fire season to like 500, that's a huge step in the right direction. And the season after that, we can talk about the Buffs as a national powerhouse or one of the 15 best teams in the country. This team was not supposed to be ranked. And frankly, I don't think this team deserves to be ranked. I don't think they're one of the 25 best teams in the country. I think that'll bear out over the remainder of this season. I still think they're much better than they had any right to be in this first season. It's a very promising season for CU, and the stock ticker overall on the program is way the fuck up.
Yeah, Zach, you're right. This is a warm-up year. This is a get your feet wet year. This is a year of exposure. And I think the most important thing that's happening with this program that we haven't talked about yet, and we'll break down this game really quickly. Obviously, there's not a whole lot to break down because it was just an ass whooping, but the amount of eyes that are on Boulder week after week after week, Boulder, Colorado, it's unprecedented. And if you are a young high school, if you're a top high school recruit, it's getting to the point now where we've heard about it, Zach. They are calling Dion. This is not a normal thing. Okay. This is something that kids will do for in Alabama, Georgia, Ohio State, Michigan, the big boys, right? The fact that CU, little old CU, that again was 1-11. I can't stress that enough. 1-11 last year, the laughing stock of all college football, are now having not just any recruits, not just like the best recruits coming out of Colorado, some of the best recruits in the nation are calling because they want to play for Dion. That is the biggest thing that is happening this year. And honestly, this might be a little bit tongue in cheek. You as a Buff fan and we as Buff fans, Zach, should almost care less about their win-loss total and more about how much attention this program is getting. Because at the end of the day, what do these kids want? They want to go to a college with a good head coach, with a lot of exposure, where they know they can grow as a player and eventually get drafted, or at the very least, get that NIL money while they can, right? At the end of the day, it's about the love of the game, and it's about that money. You got to make that paper, son. And do you think that these kids are smart enough to realize that Colorado right now is the best place to do that? It's better than Bama, Georgia, Ohio State, Michigan, Oregon, USC, all of these heavy hitters. And again, that's not an indictment on any of those other schools, but none of those other schools have Dion. That's why I'm confident that, like, week after week, Zach, when we're talking about how bad they are up front on the offensive and defensive side of the ball, the main reason that they are not going to be, and that we told everyone they were not going to be that competitive this season. You don't think that they know that? You don't think Dion and the staff knows that they have to shore up their lines? Anybody that has watched any football at all in their lives know that it's a problem. And it is becoming more evident every single week. They gave up 7 sacks for 76 yards lost. That is atrocious. We talked about Irving and James, the stud running backs that they had and how they had to somehow limit them. Combined for 143 rush yards on 17 carries. That's almost 8.5 yards per tick. And if they kept feeding them, they would have had even more. But they spread the ball around. So let us circle back and return to the point of this, and that's, you might be discouraged as a CU fan, or you might think, man, we just got whooped as like the game of the week by Oregon, who is a marketably better team, like head and shoulders above where CU is right now. That is not going to turn off recruits, because it is about exposure and it is about getting to that next level. Those are the two ingredients that you want. You want eyes on you, and you want a school that will develop you into the best possible football player that you can be. And right now, very few, if any, schools are doing that, as well as Colorado and as well as Deion Sanders is doing that.
Yeah, I mean, I fully agree with that point. Talk about the exposure. Colorado paid a firm. This is per the Daily Camera, so good journalistic source here. They paid a firm to research, I think a marketing firm, to research how much money in free marketing has been generated from the football team's push on ESPN, on everything. And I believe since the TCU game, it's $90 million. That's insane. In free marketing money.
Mind-blowing.
90 million. Have you seen the list of celebrities that are going to be at the number 5 ranked USC game?
No, but I will say this. I figured that this would be the big time game, right? Like, this would be the actual Hollywood game. Dan Lanny's talking about, like, we're not playing in Hollywood. Like, that was another weird comment that he made. It's like, well, CU doesn't play in Hollywood either. You know, they're in Boulder, but I digress. This is going to be the Hollywood game, because if there is a team with as much juice in terms of off-field stuff right now, it's USC. It's Lincoln Riley. It's Caleb Williams, who is, you know, the second coming, arguably the greatest quarterback prospect we have seen since Andrew Luck, since John Elway, like all of the heavy hitters. You have teams that seem like they are actively tanking to make sure that they have a chance to
Denver
draft
Broncos.
Caleb Williams. And of course, Zach, you're talking about Southern California. That's Cali, baby. That's where all the superstars are coming from. So this is going to be the game where all the eyes are at. Now, I think it's important that they put up a little bit more of a fight than they did against Oregon. You're going to have a lot of potential recruits there, along with all of those celebrities. CU has to play a more complete, better game. I'm not saying win. I'm not even saying cover the spread, even though that would be really nice. But you have to have a better showing than they did. You got that list? Who's going to be in attendance?
You got to put up a better fight. I absolutely agree there. The celebrity. So first, you've got Big Noon Kickoff coming again. The Buffs have had 3 home games, and Big Noon Kickoff has been there all 3 times. They've played.
Unreal.
This will be their 5th game of the season, and the 4th time Big Noon Kickoff is at their game. It's the CU Buff show, pretty much.
I love it.
So you've got that element, and then you've got LeBron James, the best basketball player in NBA history, Mario. You've got
well, he's top 5.
You've got Jay-Z, you've got Matthew McConaughey, and then Lil Wayne's
all right. Sorry, who's the last one?
Lil Wayne is back again. Maybe to
of course Lil Wayne is back. Now, I assume LeBron is going, like, I mean, obviously all these guys love Dion. That goes without saying. But I know LeBron's son is committed to USC to play basketball, right?
Yes. Bronny did consider CU, though.
He did, yeah. CU was one of those schools, but maybe he goes to check out Boulder. He gets to experience it a little bit more, and I don't know. Maybe he transfers over here next year too. We're just gonna put that out there. Maybe that's a possibility. Bring Bronny James on back in. Bring him back to Colorado, where he truly belongs. Get him away from all that glitz and glamour and all those distractions. You don't need it, Bronny. Come to humble Boulder, okay?
Yeah, that, or hey, if LeBron wants to ring chase, I mean, reigning NBA champs.
Well, see, that's exactly why he's not the best player of all time, because he does in fact ring chase and wasn't able to do it all with one team. Anyway, let's move on from that. Zach, quick little. We're just doing a quick little blurb, a little review about this game, because obviously it was not fun. It was extremely difficult to watch, really, from pillar to post. Like, there was not much entertainment factor at all for Buff fans. I'm sure Oregon fans had an absolute blast. I'm sure Patrick Quixote was over there peeing his pants with excitement because, he has so little in his life that he can actually get excited about. And he roots for a team that's called the Ducks, which is so stupid, by the way. Real quick, you might be seeing on your screen, ladies and gentlemen, if you're not familiar with the show, every week Zach and I do leaders of the week and dogs of the week, because as you might know, Deion Sanders does not have captains. He has leaders and dogs. Not all leaders are dogs. Not all dogs are leaders, but some are both. And we just made the executive decision, no leaders today. I mean, maybe there's guys out on that field, Zach, that we're unable to see, but it just didn't feel right. You can't go and stomp on the Oregon logo at midfield, something that, by the way, they got really upset about when Nebraska did to them. And you can't do that and lose 42-6. Not a whole lot of leadership going on when you are making those kinds of decisions. And hopefully they learn from their bad behavior, because it's one thing to disrespect a team before the game like that. And is it a complete another thing when you don't back it up at all and you get your teeth kicked in? So anyway, move on. My dog of the week. I've been so unbelievably impressed with this guy. Xavier Weaver, 9 receptions, 75 yards. Zach, obviously it's tough to pick a dog in a game like this. But Weaver's still working without having the benefit of Travis Hunter on the other side, without having another receiver really step up to be that wide receiver 2 in Travis Hunter's absence. Xavier continues to produce. And I've said it before and I'll say it again. Every week, I'm becoming a bigger and bigger fan of this kid. I think he is a phenomenal football player. And I think on this trajectory, I would not be surprised at all to see him playing on Sundays.
I'm with you. He's got what it takes to play on Sundays. He doesn't have the one elite trait, but he's just a really, really good football player. Like, Jimmy Horn's the fast guy and Travis Hunter's the just an alien,
the everything guy.
It's easy to look over Xavier Weaver, but Weaver, when he was in that same offense with Jimmy Horn in South Florida, like dramatically outproduced them. And you're seeing that play out again here at Colorado. He was less athletically talented, but just a better pure wide receiver. I think he's a terrific talent. The guy that stood out to me is Amarian Cooper. And it might be a weird pick because I don't think he had a great day. I don't think the defense had a great day. Or he didn't have a great day in the sense he went up against Troy Franklin, who's a borderline first-round wide receiver, and more often than not, he lost that matchup. But what I was impressed by was how he, got back up after a CSU game. Like, his performance this week was much better than what Torrey Horton and CSU did to him. And in fact, I'd argue Amarian Cooper was the best player on a Buffs defense. That got killed, but tied for the team lead in tackles, tied for the team lead in tackles for loss, also had a pass defense, was all over for the Buffs, as much as you could be. And I think there's something to be said for Travis Hunter was out of this game. Amarian Cooper was asked to step up and take his place. And Amarian Cooper did, in the sense that he was the best player on the defense. You're not going to replace Travis Hunter, but he stepped up and he was, for my money, the best player on the defense. So he gets my dog of the week this week.
I dig that. So, we'll go through the rest of this, man, really quick. I had mentioned it earlier when we previewed this game. We told everybody that they had an incredible two-headed monster in that backfield between Irving and James. I think Irving is another one of those guys. The value of the running back position in the NFL notwithstanding, I think that he is a day two pick, Bucky Irving. I mean, I don't think they tackled him on their first attempt once the entire game. That dude put on a show, and honestly, had they continued to feed him, he could have had a career day. And Troy Franklin, that was the other guy that we had discussed, and we said, they had a hard time slowing down Horton. Troy Franklin, for my money, is a better receiver. Again, nothing against Horton, but Franklin is that guy. And he was routinely running wide open. I mean, he had that double move on that corner post, I think it was. And I mean, it wasn't like he was so wide open, you assume it's a breakdown in coverage. But he just left his man in the dust. And again, you can't even feel bad if you're CU because he's just that good. And those were the guys that we had mentioned, and they all went off. I mean, Troy Franklin, 8 receptions, 126 yards, and 2 touchdowns. And it was just one of those games where Oregon was able to do whatever the hell that they wanted. And I will leave you with this, Zach, and I'll leave everybody with this before we preview the USC game really quick. What Deion said in his post-game presser about how you better get me now. I thought that was the perfect, most Deion response ever. And if it was anybody else saying it, Zach, if that's any other coach saying some stuff like that, I'm like, ooh, buddy, like, let's win half of our games first. Let's go to a bowl game first before we start traversing down that road, because then if it doesn't happen, you're setting yourself up for a lot of embarrassment and failure. But because it's Deion, it just rings differently. And I believe him 100%. And more importantly, Zach, you say that so that the kids in your locker room know, like, oh, this is just the beginning. This is our starting point, and it's all uphill from here.
Yeah, guess what? He's right. He's right. Like, they're going to get a lot of players. They're going to have a really good recruiting class this year. And you don't think they're going to kill the transfer portal again? Like, they will. They will, yes. They'll lose some of the guys they brought in, and they will reload.
Can they literally please just recruit linemen? Just get the biggest, fattest, most athletic for their size dudes that you could possibly find. Like, they got to beef up these lines so bad. And you know what, Zach? We are going to keep hounding on this, and we are going to keep making this point all season until it gets better. And I pray that it gets better. I don't see how it will, but I think it's important to note that we have been driving this point home ever since we started this podcast, ever since we started doing this show. And then you got people like Ben Albright, who doesn't have an original thought because he's listening to our podcast and borrowing our takes. And we appreciate that. Like, that's not me throwing shade at Ben. because, he's not a college football guy because he's one of those people we talked about at Albright NFL. He's the NFL guy. He's not a college guy. He can't watch the games the way that you and I do, Zach. He can't break down these Buffs games as eloquently as we do. So it's just I just want to say we appreciate Ben borrowing our takes. Like, maybe give us a shout out next time. We're still trying to build up our audience and get people tuned into our podcast. Usually you want some reciprocity with something like that. But you know what, Ben? You're welcome for that take. And if you're listening to this, feel free to borrow any of our other hot fire takes that we have, because honestly, Zach, we haven't been wrong about anything yet.
Not really, except for Oregon, Colorado being close. I think this one should be a little closer this week.
But we knew they were going to lose, so we weren't all the way wrong. We were just kind of wrong.
Just kind of wrong, fortunately. This week, I think they'll be a little closer. I'll say 45-31 USC.
Yeah, that's interesting. I have 49-32, and maybe that's wishful thinking. We know that the USC defense is susceptible. At least that's what we've been told. I mean, that's kind of the MO of a Lincoln Riley team, right? Dating back to his days in Oklahoma, you have excellent offenses that can fill it up, but you do not have excellent defenses that can fill them in. So real quick preview, just in case you've been living under a rock and know absolutely nothing about college football, they have this guy named Caleb Williams. It's really freaking good. Maybe one of the best quarterback prospects that we've ever seen. How good has he been this year, Zach? 15 touchdowns to 0 interceptions, 1,200 yards, and this team is averaging 55 points per game. Now, granted, they had some cupcake teams that they played earlier on, just like how we talked about Oregon did. They pumped those numbers up. And so I'm thinking that they're going to score 49. To me, Zach, if you're holding them under their season average, that's a win to me. But we need to see somebody else besides Xavier Weaver step up in that receiving core. We need Dylan Edwards to wake back up, because ever since week 1, and maybe it's no fault of his own, maybe it's scheme, they've got to get him involved. They've got to get him in space. Like, what happened to the 4-touchdown Dylan Edwards that we saw in week 1? Because that dude has been a shell. Like, that man is on milk cartons right now. And again, maybe it's not his fault. Maybe it's the scheme. But somebody else, at least one other person, Zach, has got to step up for this CU offense. It can't be Shedeur to Xavier Weaver every single play with Shedeur running for his life every single snap.
I want this to be the Alden McCaskill game. You talked about the Lincoln Riley trend of he struggled to build defense. That's largely because he struggles to build the front 7 up defensively. Alden McCaskill is a great running back. He runs with power. He, I think, should be the primary back, and Dylan Edwards should be the change of pace back off of him. It didn't see a ton of work in the Oregon game. I think this is hopefully the week he really starts getting some run, and I'm excited to see what he can do. That's what I want to see. One thing we should mention, we talked about USC and Caleb Williams and everything. Zachariah Branch, USC's true freshman wide receiver. Goodness, he is a Travis Hunter level talent.
Yeah, he's phenomenal.
Watch out. He's dangerous. And every week has gotten harder. It was like, oh, you thought Torrey Horton was a good receiver? Here's Troy Franklin. Oh, you thought Troy Franklin was a good receiver? Here's Zachariah Branch. It's scary hours there.
Does it scare you at all seeing Brendan Rice on that other side? I'm going to be perfectly honest with you, Zach. When I first saw him at CU, I thought that he was going to be a budding superstar. I still remember a game that they had against Utah several years ago. I think they were in the snow. It might have been his freshman year. He had 2 touches that game. He caught a bubble screen, and he had a punt return. Took them both to the house, and he had, I think, 120-plus total yards in those 2 touches. It was the only time that he touched the ball the entire game. Then the following year was more the same. Like, he was that red zone threat where they would just kind of throw it up to him and he would go make a play. And so when he transferred to USC, my initial thought was like, man, he is going to ball out. And maybe he just gets a little bit lost in the shuffle because they are so stacked with weapons. But if I'm remembering his stat line, I think he only has 12 catches on the year so far, but 5 or 6 of them have gone for touchdowns. So It's clear who they're looking for. I mean, he's a big body receiver. You know what? While I'm at it, I'm going to give you a bold prediction. I think Brendan Rice scores against his former team, but I think that CU also at some point, somehow, some way, gets the best of Brenden Rice as well.
I like the bold prediction. I could see a big day for Brenden Rice in a bit of a revenge game. Dang, I don't have a bold prediction. I'll say Alden McCaskill touchdown. I do think this is the Alden McCaskill game.
I got to see a Cavassier smoke game too. I mean, we haven't seen hardly any of him, if at all. And honestly, I don't know that much about him, Zach, aside from the fact that he has maybe the best name in all of college football. Cavassier smoke? Are you kidding me? It doesn't get any better than that.
Yeah, he needs to get worked more into the offense. I agree.
All right, man, before we get out of here, any closing remarks? Anything else you want to get off your chest before we get out of here?
Yeah, hang in there, Broncos country. This is not Broncos country, Buffs Nation. Excuse me. Both should try.
Hey, you hang in there too, though, Broncos country.
It's a rough stretch. The Buffs are still without their very best player, Travis Hunter. They're playing the very best team they'll play all year. Might not be another fun weekend. Might be a painful one. Next weekend, though, or they'll have a bye week. They'll have some chance to, get things back in gear. And I think the stretch run of the season should be fun for the Buffs. So hang in there.
Absolutely. And really quick before we get out of here, thoughts and prayers up to Shiloh Sanders. The report was that he was taken to a hospital. Perhaps too much information, but the report that he was urinating blood, which is never good. Apparently there was some sort of kidney shot that he had taken during the game. Don't have an update right now. It doesn't appear to be serious. But these internal organ injuries, can we please have them stop? Because honestly, to me, someone that works in this field as a body worker, that would be the scariest thing. Everything else that happens on the outside of your body, I have some sort of idea of how to help, but that kind of stuff, it freaks me out, and it's kind of like the world of unknown. So again, thoughts and prayers to Shiloh. Hope that he's okay. Hopefully that he is able to go on Saturday, because if he's not, that is another massive piece of your team and of your defense. And that's the last guy that you can afford to lose right now against this USC team if you want to have a fighter's chance whatsoever. So we will leave you with that. And also, before we get out of here, Zach, Zach and I just want to, shout out Dan Lanning and say, really on behalf of CU in general, you're welcome. You're welcome for your 15 minutes. You're welcome for that shot of relevancy that you had, and I hope that you enjoyed it. Because as Coach Carl eloquently put, nobody is going to say the name Dan Lanning again for the rest of the season. That's what we call the prime effect, baby. I've been Mario Vitanzi. That has been Zach Seegers. This has been Let's Talk Buffs, easily the best Buffs podcast that you can listen to. And again, it is crazy. It is so crazy that Zach was even available to do this. I was just sitting on my couch minding my own business. Zach asked me to do this podcast, and I'm like, nobody's paying you to do a Buffs podcast? That's insane. And then they have the audacity to bring in other people that don't know shit about college football? That's really crazy. Anyway, I'm super grateful and just I feel incredible and amazing that I get to do this weekly podcast with Zach freaking Seegers over here. You don't need to say anything, Zach. You know what I'm doing. And you don't need to become a part of it because I'm a bit of a loose cannon. Thank you all so much for watching. Mario Vitanzi, Zach Seegers at Vitanzi Therapy over here. There he is. At Zach_Seegers. Thank you all so much for joining us. We love you, and Sko Buffs.
Sko Buffs. Thank you, Mario.